Good morning once again to everyone. I'm Moratoa Mokoena, Senior Researcher at Andani.Africa, and your host for today's very special gathering. It's honestly such a joy to welcome you all to witness in a very defining moment for us at Andani.Africa. And we're giving you an exclusive look into something we've been building quietly and passionately in the background. And we finally get to share with you today our newest initiative, Malaika. Most of you on this call have been part of Andani's journey in one way or another. And if you're new to the organization, maybe you stumbled across a post or you've heard about us through a friend, we're absolutely thrilled to welcome you and give you a glimpse into who we are and what we are up to. Now, for the business of today, in partnership with Amazon Web Services, AWS, we've been developing a transformative digital infrastructure designed to bring visibility, structure, impact to Africa's creative economy, particularly where data management is concerned. So today we're going to show you Malaika's features, the possibilities, and the kind of future we believe it can help shape for the creative sector. And more than that, we want to bring you in not just as users, but as co-investors in the movement and the opportunities that Malaika presents. To kick us off, I'd like to hand over to our co-executive director and founder of Andani, Lonwabo Mavuso, who will walk us through how Malaika came to be and why it matters.
Thank you, Muratwa, and apologies. I seem to be disappearing into the matrix. Good morning, colleagues, partners, and friends, and thank you again for joining us today. We are thrilled to welcome you to the special sneak preview event, as my colleague Muratwa mentioned. Today is all about giving you a glimpse into our work in progress, a first of its kind data management platform designed specifically for the creative industries in Africa. Over the past couple of months, as Morato mentioned, we've been building something we believe has the potential to transform how data is collected, shared, and used across the sector. Your presence here today means a lot to us, and we are eager to walk this journey with you. We hope today's session will spark conversation, questions, and valuable feedback that will help us shape a platform that truly responds to the needs and ambitions of our sector. Before we delve into the Malaika presentation, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to Andani.Africa and share why we believe we are uniquely positioned to lead this important work. So we're going to play start off with a short video that we're going to play. There seems to be, the sound is not playing. Could we perhaps start the video again and see if we are winning with the sound?
Africa's creative industries are on the rise, growing by between 2 and 3% per year, with countries. You see what the creativity, the entrepreneurship. What about the international reach or the economic impact? We see it all. We see that every single time a local TV show is watched on Netflix in South Africa, on average, it is viewed another 26 times across the world. Did you know that of the top 15 artists on YouTube, Sub-Saharan Africa None are from Nigeria, or that Tanzania was the second highest number of artists on that same list. Overall, Africa's creative industries are on the rise, growing by between 2 and 3% per year, with countries like Nigeria leading the pack globally in the entertainment and media space. But these are the very international spaces, right? So what does this mean for ordinary people trying to make a living in the arts, or young people starting off on this journey? The creative industries are a youth-friendly sector, open to the energy and creativity of young people, often set up to grow skills from within the industry as you work your way up. In Ghana and Uganda, for example, a quarter of the population in the creative industries are young people. Africa's gaming industry is dominated by young people and is set to grow by 12% between 2020 and 2025. As a continent that has the largest global youth population, our creative economies are a part of our future. When you see entertainment, culture expression, art, we see young people stepping into new industries and growing in brilliant opportunities. We see the possibilities of reaching out to the world and sharing who we are. We see the future of this continent. See what we see. Andani, Africa.
Thank you for that, and apologies for the sound that came through. Just pulling up my presentation. So Andani.Africa essentially is a research and insights and data management company, and our work is specifically in the cultural and creative industries. And we exist to advance and develop the cultural and creative economy on the continent. We were established in 2016, and we are a team of creatives, researchers, strategists, and technologists who are all passionate and, should I say, talented in terms of the work that we are doing in advancing Africa's creative economy. As mentioned, we have 3 focus areas within Andani: research, insights, and data management. Within sort of research, we do monitoring and evaluation, feasibility studies, market research, market mapping, and sponsorship evaluations. And within sort of insights, we offer strategic advisory services to our clients and partners. This could range from policy consideration and advisory work to investments. We also do what we call data storytelling, where we take emerging insights from research and turning them into engaging content. And lastly, we offer sort of data management technological solutions that help our clients to gather data, to manage their data, as well as to analyze and visualize their data. And certainly, Malaika comes off this sort of service offering from an Andani perspective. Over the years, we've had the pleasure of working in over 15 countries across the African continent and working with extraordinary partners and associates. And this work has certainly enabled us to see sort of the emerging trends and challenges that are faced by the cultural and creative industries on the African continent. And more so, it's also shown us the huge, enormous challenges when it comes to data management and access to data on the African continent when it comes to cultural and creative industries. And in many ways, the work that we are doing through Malaika is to sort of address these challenges, as we have noted as we've been doing various sort of research projects on the African continent. Our work is really informed by sort of 3 main sort of approaches: data humanism, blending African storytelling traditions with technology to empower data-driven insights and foster social transformation. We're very much solutions orientated by focusing ensuring that our research is focused on actionable, strength-based insight and embracing multiple ways to address Africa's diverse challenges. And lastly, we are indeed African relevant. We are driving creativity and the future potential of Africa. Our work is certainly grounded in local expertise to ensure contextual specific impact and action. And this is why we work with a lot of associates across the continent as we implement research projects. So with that being said, as I mentioned earlier on, the work of Malaika has really been informed by the research that we've been doing now for over many, many years. And certainly what Malaika is, as mentioned previously, is an ambitious data management initiative that has been developed by Andani for the sector and by the sector. It is designed to tackle the significant data challenges faced by the African creative economy, as I mentioned. The platform empowers professionals, practitioners to collect, manage, and most importantly, learn from their data. Malaika aims to drive and advance research and development across the continent's creative industry by enabling data-informed decision-making. And as you would know, if you had worked in the sector, in the creative sector in Africa, we mostly operate from gut feel. And so Malaika certainly is pushing the agenda of having much more sort of R&D in terms of the way and processes that we do in terms of developing, be it creative industry services or creative industries products. So I just want to double click on this idea of R&D and share with you some sort of emerging stats around where we fare with regards to research and development. So in Africa, we only sort of spend about 0.5% of our GDP in R&D. This is below the global average of 1.9%. Furthermore, research points to by increasing your spend by 10% spend in R&D, it increases or boosts the GDP of a country between 3 to 6%. So it's really, really an important aspect in terms of advancing advancing agendas of different countries, be it in Africa or elsewhere in the world. And why is R&D important for the cultural and creative industries? Well, one, it makes businesses and organizations smarter. It helps creatives and professionals understand what works and what doesn't work. Furthermore, it also attracts money into the sectors. Investors, we know this for sure, investors and funders are more likely to support projects backed by solid research and results. It also supports new ideas. R&D allows artists, designers, and filmmakers to try new things like using digital tools and new ways to sell their product, as I mentioned earlier on. And lastly, and most importantly, it also boosts job creation. Through R&D, we're able to understand how the sort of value chains of the creative industries work and identify opportunities where new jobs can emerge. So again, Malaika seeks to drive the agenda of R&D, assisting creative practitioners as well as investors in the sector to sort of know where exactly to sort of invest with regards to growing and developing the cultural and creative industries. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Morato.
Thank you so much, Lon. And to all of you who are on the call and want to engage with that video again, please do find it on www.andani.Africa so that you can see it. But as you've heard from Lon, Malaika is by the sector, for the sector, and at the heart of it, it's designed to make and help make your data work for you. If anything sparks a question or an idea as the team engages, please do drop a question or a reflection in the tab on the bottom right of the call, not in the chat box. We'll be circling back to Q&A later in the program. Up next, we're diving into Malaika itself, what it looks like, what it can do, and how it might change the way you think about your work and ensure that your projects are delivering real value. To give us a proper sneak preview and walkthrough into Malaika and inspire our thinking around your theory of change and the power of tailored monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning frameworks, I'd like to invite Molemo Muila, who is also our co-executive director and founder of Andani.
Thank you very much, Muratwa. Hello, everybody. I want to reiterate that it's really exciting to be with you all here today. I think this is a very new venture for us. It's a kind of big leap forward. And so exciting, a little bit scary. It's been a lot of learning for us. But I think it really comes from a place of a real commitment to understanding that there's a major gap in this sector's capacity to learn from itself. To learn from the information it's producing all the time, and to make that learning shareable, as my colleague Lonab has already shared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of talk you through Malaika itself. As has already been mentioned, this is a kind of work in progress. We are still in the development phase. We've pulled together a really extraordinary tech team of people from varied sort of capacities within the tech world, who've come together, supported by AWS, to develop this platform. It's aiming to launch around September, with the intention that there's this tool particularly focused initially on monitoring and evaluation. But it's really a long-term investment for Andani. This is a project that I think is going to take us years to really pull to fruition in such a way that it can respond to the broadness of needs in the sector, but also be part of, I guess, a growing agenda for the creative sector to engage with its own data. And so while what I'm going to be sharing you is really the beginning, in many ways, we're kind of calling on a community of practice in the creative sector, starting with monitoring and evaluation, but expanding that into other forms of data collection and data management, to work together to build something that works for us. And that's really the agenda. To start off with, I'm going to share my presentation very quickly, and sort of pick up where Lonwabo left off, to talk about what we've kind of worked on with Malaika. So as Lonwabo already shared with you, R&D is vital, and in large part, the creative sector does R&D in a very kind of informal, anecdotal way. And to be honest, this has actually worked really well for the sector. We have a sector that is quite good at working from gut feel and identifying what projects we think are going to be really impactful, working out how to kind of grow the sector. But I think we would all agree that there's potential to expand that and to sort of formalize and institutionalize some of our learning processes, particularly so that we can share that information. So what I'm going to ask each of you to do is just take a second to think about all of the reports you've written. And I think for many of us in this room, we probably couldn't even fully put a number to the number of reports we've written on projects that we've done in the creative sector over the years. And when you think about all of the reports you've written, can you kind of think about maybe a report from a couple of years ago and that ever knowing challenges section, and how you maybe could compare the challenges from that report and the challenges, say, from a report that you wrote last year. And I think for many of us, we probably could say that while I can't remember a specific report from a couple of years ago, I do have a sense of that project, and the learnings from that project I have kind of taken on board, and it informs the way that I work today. But the question is, can that learning be shared more broadly with others? And are the people who perhaps are working on similar projects or who are working at the same organization you wrote that report in years ago, are they able to pull from the challenges of that project, or are they reinventing the wheel? And I think what a lot of us know is that often we're having to reinvent the wheel. We're starting from scratch because we aren't really able to share our learnings. So while Malaika is intended as a very broad data management platform over time, we've really started with monitoring and evaluation because we're producing reports all the time. As a sector, we're actually developing a lot of data. We're generating a lot of information all of the time. And so we really chose this first step as a way to, one, kind of aim for low-hanging fruit. What is the data we're producing already? How do we make that data go further? How do we make it more shareable? How do we get that data sort of more integrated into our organizations, into our ways of learning in an organization? But two, and I think this will be vital for many of you in the room, how do we make it easier to do that work? So, of course, we also know that many of us are spending immense amounts of time on monitoring and evaluation and report writing. And so Malaika's aimed to do that. So what we have really tried to do is develop a platform that can enable all of us to do our monitoring and evaluation in simpler, faster ways, and then enable that learning to sort of become part of our organizations. So what I'm going to show you quickly is a few examples of the features of Malaika, and then I'm going to go to the Malaika platform and explain one specific feature to you in a bit more detail. So what you're seeing here is one of the features of Malaika, which is the general administrative dashboard. And as you can see, it's got a range of different things that are useful for a kind of administrator role, a kind of high-level project manager who is maybe overseeing multiple projects to facilitate some of the very high-level monitoring and evaluation, logistics and administration work. So sort of working with various team members, working with various projects and reports related to those over a specific period of time, and managing approvals between different staff members or different members of a team. Perhaps even more importantly, is we're working to try and dashboard monitoring information. This isn't a very easy process for us because we're trying to make dashboards that can respond to the many, many different kinds of projects. So many of us in the room who may be working on projects right this minute would be able to say that no two projects are alike. But what we're trying to do is develop strategies to really make it simple to visualize and track our projects. So what you're seeing here is, for example, a survey that's gone out or a midterm report that's gone out. So a kind of request for reporting, and then the ability to track how many people have already reported, ability to track how many days still left until final deadline date. We'll be able to sort of see how many reports have perhaps been started, but also a kind of high-level overview of some of the key indicators we're often tracking. In these cases, they're sort of more quantitative indicators. I'll talk a little bit more about qual as well. And really be able to track over a project, how close am I getting to the intended target, but also where am I maybe seeing significant gaps where I need to pivot in my project. And we're trying to make this kind of simple and easy to view at a kind of glance. Perhaps one of the most important elements of what Malaika is going to be able to do is enable us to automate reporting systems to reporting systems from, say, other project members, from perhaps grant beneficiaries, from collaborators, directly into our broader reporting systems, and particularly into things like log frames. Now, the intention here is to try and automate a lot of our reporting strategies in such a way that we're not dealing with millions and millions of PDFs anymore. So what our data entry approach responds to is the fact that generally, when we're monitoring and evaluating projects, we often need to get various forms of kind of responses into our project. That might be a survey of audience members, or if, for example, you are running a project with multiple artists who are involved in that project who have to report to you on their processes and what they've been able to achieve so far. Instead of receiving PDFs of reports that maybe go into a folder but are really difficult to process collectively and take a lot of time to then transfer into a kind of collective report, our data entry model is going to enable us to distribute surveys and develop reporting templates so that people are reporting online, and to align that directly with our indicators and enable us to update our indicator log frames automatically. We will demonstrate this in more detail. It's still a tool we're working on. Again, very complex indicators across projects, vary so broadly. And we want to make sure that this tool can really respond to the nuance of each project. But this is going to be a vital part of what Malaika can do to really lower the amount of work that people are doing in their projects, but also ensure that when you're getting reports, when you're getting information in your monitoring and evaluation processes, you're able to keep them all in the same place, source them, and access them. Perhaps most importantly from this data entry process is that because we're going to automate this process, because we're able to get reporting that fundamentally connects directly to the indicators in our monitoring and evaluation structures, we are able to analyze that data much more quickly. So I showed you the dashboard of, for example, key indicators, targets versus actuals. We're able to do that because of this automating of data entry. And we're also then able to build out broader analysis so that you can start to see what's really emerging in your project much more quickly. One of the vital things with this is also that we've done quite a lot of research trying to understand from a range of different people in the creative sector, what are some of the biggest challenges in monitoring and evaluation? And one of the core things is around qualitative feedback. So we know in our projects, the sort of proverbial bums on seats, the number of people involved in a process, doesn't necessarily equate to the quality of the experience. And often we're pushed into a numbers-based approach that doesn't really respond to the value that creative practice often brings to individuals. But what we found is that in receiving reporting on qualitative work, often paragraphs and paragraphs of text are really difficult to process, particularly across multiple reports or multiple surveys. And people don't have the time to read through paragraphs of text. And so by automating the system, pulling it all into a singular sort of data storage space and aligning it with your indicators, both qualitative and quantitative, we also have the possibility to use new technologies, AI, to help you prompt your data, which means that you can ask your data what you need to know. If there's a specific pattern that you're curious about, you can really ask that information. And we'll demo that in future too. We're still in the process of building that. Finally, I think a really vital part of what Malaika is trying to do is to really respond to the needs of the creative sector and to shift us into spaces that are doing better work for us. And one of the core parts of this, in speaking to many people working in this area, is that when we're doing all this reporting, it's often for whoever holds the purse strings, and it's not necessarily feeding back into what we do every day and helping us grow our work. Now, this is a broader evaluation concern that we're not learning from M&E processes. We're not learning from all of the reporting data we're developing. And particularly on the African continent and the challenges that the continent has faced with, say, development funding, etc., there's a broader conversation around how do we make monitoring and evaluation really build the work that we're doing on the continent. And a key part of this is, for the creative sector, ensuring that these numbers are easier to collect. This detailed content is really information we can access and read and process, but also then that it's feeding into the objectives of our organization. And so that's what I want to quickly demo for you, is how we're kind of starting to approach this. And so I'm going to leave the presentation for a second and go to Malaika. So one of the key things that we're building into Malaika for the monitoring and evaluation process, and this will shift for other parts, is trying to help organizations develop more in-depth monitoring and evaluation processes that are not only quicker, more automated, easier to kind of access and read and understand, but also are connected to the values and agendas of our projects. And for many of us, monitoring and evaluation is not our profession. For a few of us who are lucky enough to have kind of come from that field, be fully trained in that field, it is. But for many of us in the creative sector, we're kind of having to learn on the go. And so we're trying to build into Malaika, working with a number of sort of best practice trends and experts, how to build monitoring and evaluation tools that really respond to the needs of organizations on the African continent. And one of the core things we've started with is the theory of change. So when you come to Malaika and you open an account, one of the first things you will do is create a new project, and this is what it would look like. One of the options we have in Malaika is to have, say, like an applications process. So, for example, if artists need to apply to a project that you're managing, we can do that through Malaika. But what I'm going to show you today is how we're going to sort of set up the monitoring evaluation process. So in creating a new project, you would have to fill in these details. I'm going to just quickly put some information in here. We obviously will have a range of different currencies that we can work with. And one of the things we're building is better ways of analyzing financial data. I'm going to just put as many zeros as I can. And you would put in a start date of your project. Maybe it starts today and perhaps runs for, let's say, 6 months. And once you've started a project, you will be able to build in the various parts of the Malaika platform that you want for your project. So many of these are things that I've already discussed. For example, data entry, the form creation and deployment, the surveys and reporting forms, but also things like having multiple team members on team and the kind of access requirements. You know, some people who are entering data into a system, maybe you don't want to have access to all of the information on that project. So you can select the different parts. So the part I'm going to select now and discuss is the theory of change builder. So many of you are very familiar with theory of change, but of course, most of the sector isn't. This is one particular strategy for monitoring and evaluation. It's the first one that we're building on. We would, in the longer term, like to build in other models. But theory of change is perhaps the most flexible across varied kinds of projects, and perhaps the kind of most directly connected in an immediate way for the cultural sector to the objectives and agendas of arts organizations on the continent. And so this is why we've chosen this one. And so I just want to talk you through how we're helping organizations across the continent to develop a theory of change and therefore frame a monitoring and evaluation framework that's directly related to what arts organizations are wanting to achieve. So obviously, because it's not very familiar, we developed quite a lot of information to help understand monitoring and evaluation. This is kind of just the basic introduction, but we have an M&E library that has a lot more information around M&E and can kind of help people educate themselves. And this is how the theory of change works. Firstly, if you already have a theory of change, either for your organization or for your project, we have an AI tool that can help take your existing theory of change and integrate it into the system. Or if you don't have a theory of change, you can start building one with us. So I'm not going to go through the details of this now, just for interest of time, but effectively you would follow the usual theory of change prompts and fill in your information around what your project's trying to achieve. And so you might enter a specific project goal that is really about what is the broader change that you're trying to affect? What is the kind of bigger world shift that you're trying to contribute to? You would speak to your problem statement. So what are the kind of challenges that the work that you're trying to do responds to? And here, particularly for people who are perhaps not as experienced in monitoring and evaluation, it's quite flexible, it's quite open. You can use the kinds of terminology that you want. It doesn't have to be in a fixed structure of theory of change. You discuss your needs. And in any of these things, we're kind of prompting and attempting to support people to start to get used to monitoring and evaluation language, ways of working. And so, for example, encouraging people to look at evidence of needs and not just sort of the gut feel approach that we generally take. And then to work towards outcomes. And here we have quite a bit of support material to help people develop these. But again, You don't have to have sort of experienced understanding of how to frame outcomes. I'll explain just now, but we have a tool to kind of help that work. And here you would kind of put in your outcomes. What is the specific direct goal that your project has? And I'm just going to write a great outcome here. We have the ability to add 4 outcomes for a project. And that's partially just to try and help people keep things structured. But, as I say, this is a project in process. And so we also have the opportunity for people to request additional tools. So if you come on early to Malaika, one of the things that is really an opportunity is that we are still building the tool, and you have a lot more opportunity to say, actually, I need 6 outcomes. And then we have the ability to shift that with our tech team. And then the next step would be, of course, your activities. Again, we're trying to look at 4 activities per outcome, which is quite a lot, but giving people the flexibility to work into the kinds of log frames that they're already working with and kind of define indicators as they need to. So developing your outcomes, then based on each outcome, developing your activities. And then working, of course, to assumptions. And again, here, really just trying to kind of enable people who aren't so familiar with monitoring evaluation to start get into the rigor of what it means to think through all these different steps. In addition, sort of the next phase of this process is to support you to develop indicators, etc. But effectively, once you've filled in this information, we have an AI-supported tool that will then help you take this information, framed in whatever way really makes sense to you, and then construct this into a theory of change. This is just an example, but effectively, we would still, this tool would still use your language, still ensure that it matches the kind of tone and style of your organization or your project, but would help you sort of restructure it into the right kinds of framing to help you ensure that your outcomes, say, your activities are framed very distinctly in order to help you measure them. And so this is really the theory of change. At this step, you would be able to download this sort of designed visual theory of change, and then, of course, a text version. You'd be able to share it with your team and maybe discuss it further, and you can edit it. You can always go back in and change it. And importantly, there's also the ability to, if you're, say, a more junior project manager or the monitoring and evaluation official, and you need to get approval from someone else, you can request approval directly from the system if that's your kind of access requirement in the system. It'll enable approval and feedback directly in the system. And this really helps you build your theory of change. It helps you kind of frame the agenda and intention of your work. And then from this step, we then go into indicator development, log frames if you need them. It may not always be necessary, and supporting the development of both qualitative and quantitative indicators, and then a learning process. We're really excited to be working on this. It's in many ways quite experimental. There aren't really tools like this globally. And so it is very much a learning process, and we're really looking to all of you to help us strengthen, refine, and improve what Malaika can be. And of course, as I say, the monitoring and evaluation is the low-hanging fruit, because this is the thing we're already doing. We don't want to add work onto already very busy lives of those of us working in this sector. We want to refine and enable and support it. And of course, over time, towards the launch, we'll show you how we're doing that in other ways as well. I'll close off there and hand over to Morato.
Thank you so much, Mulimo. I believe as we see this platform, it's actually quite exciting to see the amount of work that has gone into it. And I know that the entire continent cannot wait to experience it for themselves. And to everyone on the call, I hope you're also starting to imagine how Malaika can amplify your work and make it more visible, measurable, and fundable. Because after all, funding follows data. We'd love to hear your thoughts now. And as Mulemo shared earlier, this preview is just as much about your input as it is about us sharing what we've been building. What has landed for you? What questions do you have? Are you able to share some of your perspectives from what you've been hearing? Please do use the Q&A tab at the bottom to drop your questions, your comments, your ideas, and we'll be going into a Q&A session. I'm going to Letabo Tulu's question in the chat box. Hello, absolutely love what you're doing, what you're building, we're building. Are we able to load visual data and have AI filter information from there? Pardon me if this was mentioned. I'm with my kids, so I may have missed something. Thanks for the question, Letabo.
Should I jump in there, Muratwa?
Yes, please, Mulema.
Great. Thanks for the question, Letabo. And no, actually, your little ones didn't make you miss that. I didn't mention that. So at the moment, the primary kind of approach is specific data entry, so through reporting, through surveys, but also the ability to upload additional documentation. So often with reporting, people attach images or they attach videos, and so that will be an option as well. In that process, the primary support that we have for AI is going to be text-based. And that text would primarily be in the data, sort of the data that's directly entered into the system. What we do have is an additional capacity to support uploading of kind of historic data or information that maybe exists in other formats. For example, say scanned PDFs, etc. This is not built into the Malaika sort of system. This would be an additional service that we can provide for, say, organizations who need that kind of additional step. But again, that would be text. So it wouldn't necessarily be analyzing photographs, for example. It wouldn't necessarily be analyzing images in that sense. It's more of a kind of text depending on file type in that case. Perhaps if there's sort of visual data that you have in mind specifically, if that question doesn't answer your question, you can just give us a little more perspective and I can even respond to that in the chat.
Thanks, Mulema. Priscilla Moasinga says, thank you for the presentation. If any of you on the call would like to pose a question, comment, reflection, please use our Q&A tab. It's at the bottom of the screen. Priscilla has asked a follow-up. I'm not clear how the platform moves forward to analyze indicators and draw reports.
Can jump in there again. Thanks for that, Priscilla. I think I didn't speak through it in enough detail. So this is something we are still working on, and so something we will demonstrate in future. The primary way that this is done is through the sort of monitoring of indicators. So without sort of re-showing the image, you had your targets versus actuals, and those targets versus actuals can be updated automatically, of course, with appropriate approvals. But you can see the degree to which certain indicators in your log frame are ticking up over time. And so this is going to be the primary thing, is that rather than you having to take, say, PDF reports, read through them and enter that data into a log frame, that information will be automatically done, and you will be able to monitor that live. So you're also not going to have to sort of wait till your interim report or even your final report to be uploading that information and really getting a sense of what that picture looks like, which for one thing means that you're actually monitoring. You can pivot if one of your indicators is looking like it's not going to be achieved, etc. But importantly, towards the end of the process, there is a more sort of detailed analysis process that's going to be dashboard. So we haven't developed that part yet. One of the core ways that's going to be done is actually in enabling you to prompt from your data. So being able to use AI to ask specific information that's maybe not indicator specific, right? The kind of in between gray areas that are not necessarily indicator specific, because that indicator information you're going to have constantly. And then dashboarding some basic analysis. And at the moment, that analysis is quite basic. And that is because to develop graphs that kind of analyze your data on your behalf across the vast sort of range of projects is quite challenging. So to develop kind of graphs that can kind of cover a range of different projects is the trick that we're having to engage with, and we will improve on that over time. But there will be some overall analysis around core indicators that pretty much all projects have, and we'll be able to help you identify those parts of your data. And then all of that is downloadable in report form. So you'll be able to download summaries of what's emerged. Those summaries will be both sort of dashboarded, graph visualized summaries, but also text summaries of your outcomes. And then you can also sort of download the full set of data from the system as well, so that you have that locally in addition to kind of downloading of reports. That report information, of course, is not going to be magically the final report that you need to develop. It's going to be already processed, already analyzed to some degree data that you can then take that into your final report, say to a funder or whoever else. But what it enables you to do is kind of constantly be monitoring, constantly see the shifts. If you, for example, have quarterly reports over an annual project and your beneficiaries are reporting on perhaps specific challenges on a quarterly basis, or they're reporting on, say, particular training programs on a quarterly basis, you will have summaries across, let's say you have 10, 15, 20 beneficiaries. You'll be able to download summaries of what those challenges have been collectively, but you'll also be able to download them individually. And so you have some kind of collated content, and then you have the individual content as well. I hope that answers that question.
Thanks, Mulimo. Just on reports, I think it's Maria from Bag Factory. She says, this is amazing. Are the report templates aligned to M&E or reporting funder requirements?
So here's the challenge again. Every funder has different reporting requirements, right? All of them have different formats, all of them have different requirements. So what we have is the ability to refine and adjust your log frame to some degree in relation to reporter needs, because sometimes funders will define that. Usually you will have already, say, applied for funds, you will already have indicated what your activities are going to be. You may not have refined indicators depending on the funder, but you might have specific targets already. You've already said that you're going to train a certain number of people, you're going to have audiences of a certain number. We all have those kinds of experiences. All of that is then built into the system. And then you're able to monitor that over time and auto input a lot of that information. So for example, you have a training session. Generally, we have these kind of handwritten registration forms when we have trainings, this kind of thing. That information can be uploaded and automatically updated onto your log frame. What we would like to do in future, so this won't be ready by September, but certainly in the early part of next year, is actually have a system to already digitize those registration forms so that that information goes directly. That doesn't even need to be entered. So you will need to kind of learn the Malaika system. And then for each of your projects, which of course, each one is different, all the reporting is different, align your reporting and the Malaika system to do what you need. It's not going to be a system where every funder is the same until funders kind of coordinate amongst themselves. But it does mean that if you've committed to certain activities and certain targets, you can enter those into the system. You can, through your reporting system, automatically update a lot of that information, depending on kind of how you track things. And, I think as you work with Malaika, you'll also find ways to track things more digitally so that those can be automated. And in time, kind of have a lot of that information happen quite quickly. So instead of you running a training session, having a piece of paper that people sign their registration, and then you kind of, either at reporting time or some week after, enter in those names and things into an Excel sheet, and then at some point move those into a log frame. Effectively, you'll be able to have people just register on a digital system and have that information automatically loaded into your data management system and automatically show up in your log frame. This is an example. Yeah, I think that kind of gives the best sense of that question.
Thanks, Mulimo. Before I go to Allison's question, it's just connected to the integration. Is the platform able to integrate with Microsoft tools?
So it would depend a little bit on the kinds of tools. The main way that I think the integrations would operate here is in the download functions. So we have the capacity to download in your sort of basic file types across, say, Adobe and Microsoft. We will have the ability to, for example, upload Excel sheets for budgeting and financial reporting. We'd like to automate that in time, but it's not the immediate development that we're doing. In terms of kind of other reporting systems, again, not immediately, but in time, we do know that there are certain kinds of reporting frameworks. Some people have to use OPSIS, for example. We would like to find ways to integrate the system so that there might be a more streamlined way to do that. That's not going to be done this year. That would be a kind of future agenda, a future objective. But for now, I think the primary way that would work is that when you download your data, when you download your analysis, that's going to align with your basic programs on your computer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your questions, Maria from Bag Factory. I'm heading over to Allison from IFAS. She has a few questions. So she starts off by saying, seems like an incredible resource. Well done on such a great product. First question, who has the product been trialed with? If you can share that info. I'm also curious about who the data belongs to once reports have been created. Does the data remain with the company, NPO, or body who have entered it, or is there a co-sharing ownership agreement with Andani?
Two great questions.
Yeah.
So we are still trialing. We're still doing a lot of beta testing. We're bringing people on to test various elements of it. There have been, as I said, a number of what we call discovery interviews with a range of different arts organizations, funders, individuals. And some of the people who are trialing that are people we did discovery with, some are independent. I do not believe that we have kind of signed on to give their names away. So I think I'm going to err on the side of caution and not do so. In terms of data and who the data belongs to, so this is a super important question and gives me an opportunity to also talk about some of the nerdy infrastructure things. So a really important part here is that the way we're building the structure supported by Amazon Web Services, which of course is a huge global conglomerate, is that working with such a big international infrastructure means that we can work to put in very important data security systems. We are hosting it through systems that enable us, for example, to meet GDPR requirements, GDPR being probably the most strict data security and data privacy requirements. And so we're very much aware of that and building to meet GDPR requirements very specifically, as well as, for example, the POPI Act in South Africa, which is the data privacy requirements here. At the moment, in terms of who the data belongs to, the one question here is around sort of how the access and user access operates. And the main process there is that the people who are uploading data, say, for example, beneficiaries, will own their data and enter that into the system. The collection of data that's then of the account holder of the Malaika account holder then belongs to the Malaika account holders. That's a kind of collective data. We are in the process of developing agreement systems. We're kind of speaking to lawyers to make sure that all of that is clean and well structured. And the intention is very much to think about what are the ways that we might be able to share data. And what I mean by this is that we don't know how long it would take to develop this, but the ideal situation could be that across all the education projects across the African continent, one of the things that we don't really get to see is what our projects look like in relation to other people's projects. So we might run projects that are actually very similar to a project in another country, but we don't really get a kind of high-level overview of what that looks like. We don't really get to understand ourselves in relation to kind of data across the board. As I said in the beginning, the intention is to expand Malaika to be a much broader data management, data sharing tool. And as we grow and as more data is entered into the system, if we can do a co-sharing agreement, it does mean that we can, obviously with no sort of private data and each organization approving what data they're willing to share, we can compare our data to other people's data. That means that we might be able to, in the long term, for example, dashboard kind of economics data that we source from other sources. So the kinds of information that Andani sources for some of the economics evaluations we do, we could build into the platform. And then we could compare all of the education programs across the continent that are on Malaika and have a sense of how many people are being trained, what kinds of subjects are people being trained in, what are the kinds of subjects where people are not doing as well in training, what are the kinds of training gaps, and we could dashboard that, and we could all have some level of access, not to the minutiae. It's not like my organization will be able to see the specific information of that organization. But if we have a co-sharing agreement that is at a kind of aggregated, so not detailed, but aggregated level, we can start to do that comparative sharing and collectively co-share and benefit from that. And so this is what we've kind of tasked the lawyer to look at and see how possible that might be within the requirements of things like GDPR and POPIA. And then those are the parts of the discussions we would have with particularly some of the bigger organizations that might sign up to Malaika. So this is the kind of bigger dream and is a kind of complex conversation to have with people. To say very explicitly, we would not be keeping data and selling data for, I don't know, advertising companies. So that is absolutely not the agenda at all. It would be much more about, is there a way to co-share data in order to expand the capacity for analysis across the board in this kind of co-sharing way, right? So that we all benefit from that capacity.
Thanks, Mulama. There's a question from Elise. I think it was in the chat. Very informative and promising tool. I work in the field of cultural policy and cultural relations analysis with the association Culture Solutions. I imagine institutional strategies and policies could also be reflected in the log frame to demonstrate how a project aligns with or supports these broader frameworks, AU, UNESCO.
Thank you for that question, Elise. That's actually a very interesting point. And this is why we want everybody's help, because that's actually not something that we've built in at this moment. I mean, increasingly people are having to sort of report against SDGs and this kind of thing. And that is the kind of thing that you could automate quite easily. That has not been on our agenda. And so perhaps that is something that we need to look at. I think that's a great suggestion that we can take up for sure.
Awesome. Priscilla asks, how many maximum beneficiaries can report on the platform per project? For instance, if we have a project of about 200 beneficiaries, would they all be able to report on the platform?
Okay, I can respond to this question too. So at the moment, we are building out a tiered system. And that means we will have varied tiers. We're keeping the tiers relatively limited at the moment, but would like to extend this. For example, initially we had wanted to be able to provide a tier for other researchers in the sector. And a lot of researchers are individuals, for example, and might work on project by project basis. At the moment, we haven't structured that yet, but it's in the work, something that we would like to grow into. For 200 beneficiaries, yes, that would be entirely possible. However, that would not be in the smaller tiers that we have structured. But as I say, we have a really extraordinary tech team. And so we're actually, for that scale of work, we're actually able to refine a system specifically for that scale of work. And then to ensure that, say, for example, the log frame structures, which are then going to be a little bit bigger, are well aligned to that. One of the other things is that quite a number of organizations have, say, multi-cohorts into a singular log frame. In those cases, for example, there are some ways to do that within the smaller structures. It is possible to do that, and we will give some guidance on how to kind of structure that within the system, so that there's like small log frame and then big log frame. But for 200 beneficiaries, that would likely go into what we're calling I think the enterprise tier. And then you would actually have our tech team and our Andani team present to that scale and ensuring that we're able to meet that scale. Of course, most projects in the sector aren't that size, so that's not really what we're building for at the moment. We're trying to build for a broader spectrum, but have this capacity to respond to the needs of a project that's that big.
Thank you for your question, Priscilla. And yes, thanks, Elise. We will definitely connect. Alison has a follow-up question. Thanks. Would the inputters have access to the overview or comparison data, or would that be available in a large report from Malaika and Andani at a later stage?
Thank you, Alison, for that question. Super, super important question that we're really excited to think about. So one of the things that we're aware of is that a lot of the inputters are going to be individuals, maybe really small organizations, and won't necessarily be able to immediately maintain Malaika accounts. And as I said, we haven't immediately worked out how to do the smaller accounts. But that is absolutely our agenda in the longer term. So one of the things that we're building into the current capacity is that in our research, one of the things we've identified is funders themselves recognizing the need to feed back at the end of a project based on reporting. So if I'm a small non-profit arts organization, for example, I'm reporting to a funder regularly. That funder is learning a lot about my organization. They might even have an external evaluator who's done an evaluation of my organization. They're also learning about other organizations. And just because of the nature of the sector, the nature of the kind of quick turnover, it's often really difficult for a funder to go back to an organization and say, look, this is what you're really strong at. These are your weaknesses. This is where you could grow. And so we're trying to build in the capacity for Malaika to be able to do that at an initially minimal level. Send just some key sort of highlight feedback back to people reporting, people entering data. However, one of the things that we've built into the structure is that as a reporter, there is one key way of entering data where you get an account. And in getting an account, you have a kind of login and you send your information. And what we have decided to do is to effectively build in the base background infrastructure that we can keep that account information and with the intention of, over time, finding the way to ensure that account information can be connected. So, for example, I am a small arts organization. I'm funded by Arts Organization 1, and I report to Arts Organization 1 in the year 2025. But in the year 2026, I'm funded by Arts Organization 2, who's also on Malaika, and I'm reporting to them. What that means is that my data is starting to be collected, but across multiple accounts. And we don't immediately have the direct way to do this for what we're launching this year, but it's very much in our interests that small arts organizations, even artists who are doing great work, can also benefit from all of this information across projects. And so one of the things, and here again is this question of like co-sharing data, are we willing to do that or not? Is it could mean that me as my organization, my data is being tracked across multiple projects. But over time, as we build more features into Malaika, I can then see my data and have analysis on my data across multiple projects. And what that also means is that we can start to see longitudinal information. So we can start to see, for example, you know, I put in an application in 2022 and I had to give my annual financial statements and my annual income. And then in 2028, I put in another application or report, and my annual financial statements information has to go in there again. And the thing is, because we're so disparate, because everything is PDFs, we're not able to look at that timeline. And so if we can data share, we start to see those kinds of things. And we don't need to necessarily collectively see that with the name of the organization and the details of that organization. But it would be really helpful to be able to see that at a disaggregated level. So all that is to say that it's not an immediate feature to enable that, Alison, but it is something we are very keen to build in to support smaller organizations. And we're trying to sort of preempt the ability to build that in the longer term.
Thank you, Mulimo, and thank you for your questions, Alison. Anonymous is asking about the costs to sign up. Should we ask Lon that question so that Mulimo can get a breather?
Uh, Sorry, I'm going to turn off my camera because I keep on disappearing into the matrix and I'm starting to look like an avatar. We are still working on the sort of pricing and yeah, pricing model of this. We are hoping to have this out as when we are launching the full product, which will be sometime in September. So we will keep you sort of posted with regards to sort of the pricing of the different tiered packages, as was mentioned earlier on.
Thank you, and thanks for your question, Anonymous. Back to Maria. Perhaps as a springboard from this topic of sharing of data, non-profit organizations in SA are meant to publicly present, share annual reports, and have experienced that we operate in silos. So sharing project info or focus areas reports from an outcome perspective and other statistical data would be amazing. Is there a possibility to join or be part of the beta phase in order to access the tools and support your research?
I'll jump in
That
again. Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I think totally agree that for a lot of the monitoring and evaluation space, a lot of that information is generally published relatively publicly. Usually when even funders report, they kind of report at a high level. So we're hoping that the co-sharing model will be something that everybody's willing to buy into. And at the same time recognize the need to ensure that everybody's data is secure and respect that data is the new currency and it needs to be a kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 million way sort of positive arrangement. So thank you very much for that. In terms of signing up for the beta, we will be sending out a quick survey. Sort of imposing on in a censure section now, and that will be an opportunity. So if you can absolutely sort of in the survey just mention that you're keen for that, and then we will certainly be in touch to discuss the possibilities of that. Thank you so much for the offer. It's really exciting.
Thank you. I think this is a closing of our Q&A section with a comment from Alison, who says, rather than a query, longitudinal data is so key and so hard for smaller NPOs. Great to hear about the long-time vision. Thanks for the insight and hard work here. Very exciting. I believe we've reached the end of our Q&A. If anyone does have a pressing question that they'd like to ask before we close our program, I'd like to give you 10 seconds to type now or forever hold Malaika in your heart. Okay, great. We have come to the end of our program, but firstly, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for showing up and being a part of this moment with us. We hope you're just as excited, and we truly can feel the excitement in the room. So thank you. To close us off officially and talk us through the next steps and how we can all stay connected, I'm now handing over to our Sales and Marketing Manager, Innocentia Rakosakunene, to take us home. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on this exclusive preview of Malaika. We thank you for your engagement, your questions. Has really shown us how ready the creative sector is for this transformative tool. Looking ahead, while today gave us a taste of Malaika, this is just the beginning. So mark your calendar. In August, we will be doing a demo launch with even more features and more capabilities. And just to stay connected, please follow us on our social media channels. Please check out your emails for newsletter updates, and you can reach out to us for any questions or feedback. And our team will be sending out a short survey, as Molemo has mentioned. We would really appreciate your input. And just to close off, I just wanted to say we want to thank you for your time, your question, your commitment, and to strengthening our sector. We look forward to your support on this journey with better data, better insights, and better outcome. Thank you and goodbye.